SOA is essentially a technology term, service-oriented architecture, which means something to the IT community. To the business user, however, what it really means is the opportunity now to achieve perhaps what has been described in the past as an agile and flexible IT infrastructure. Business today is far more demanding of IT, not only in terms of the capability of IT infrastructure, but probably more importantly in the ability or capability of IT to deliver in a cost-effective way and in a far quicker time frame than they've previously been used to. The example of perhaps responding to a new business initiative, whereby previously the thought process may have been that we require an application solution, a rip and replace strategy if you like, is now no longer valid. And what service-oriented architecture delivers to the business is the opportunity for IT to in fact achieve in a far quicker and far more cost-effective time frame a solution focused specifically on what it is the business needs. So in other words, it's taking what we have had previously, which is the long-term rip and replace new application strategy, to delivering a more immediate and more cost-effective response to business based on the existing IT infrastructure. So for business, it's all about quicker and cheaper. I think that in Asia Pacific, the adoption trends of SOA are slightly confused. And why I say they're slightly confused is simply because the interpretation or a clear definition of what SOA means is still causing confusion. There are organizations today that are implementing their technology based on a service-enabled application. And as a result of it, there is a view that they are subscribing to the principles of SOA. And I have a recent example of working with an organization where they tell me they're using SOA principles in terms of reuse of services. And what we actually uncovered is, in fact, the organization is effectively cut and pasting services from one implementation or one integration requirement into another. What they're not doing is actually reusing the same service. They're replicating the service. That to me is not SOA. It doesn't deliver the basic fundamentals of agility, it doesn't deliver cost effectiveness in the true sense, and it doesn't deliver true reuse. Much the same as purchasing an application today and that is services enabled, and calling that an SOA implementation is not truly compliant with what SOA in principle means. And SOA in principle is the governance, the rules, the process of supporting the reuse of services inside an organization in a way that delivers agility, flexibility, and a far more cost-effective IT environment. So I think that the true adoption of SOA is probably not quite at the level of some of the research we're seeing today, but there certainly are a number of organizations, particularly high growth organizations in perhaps the telco sector is a great example, that are now starting to adhere to the basic principles and starting with small projects driven out through the compliant with reuse, with cost effectiveness, and delivering a more immediate response to IT. You know, one of the interesting aspects of SOA adoption in our region is the difference between the so-called developed countries, if you like, the more mature countries from an IT perspective that is, and the developing high-growth countries. What we're actually seeing is that in the more traditional countries, and Singapore would be a great example, there is an incredible amount of investment in IT technology today with a strong legacy environment. And the companies in those countries are perhaps not quite as open to the principles of SOA, given the fact that they have this legacy environment, which is ironic because the fundamentals of SOA are all about enabling your legacy environment. Where we really are seeing an incredible amount of growth, if you like, is in the more developing countries where there is, in market segments where there is high growth, and I refer to telco, financial services, and even government. So in places like China, Indonesia, Malaysia, these companies operate in these high growth areas are looking at their infrastructure today and saying, well, I recognize, and let's use banking as an example, that today I'm transacting 50,000 credit card applications a day. But I do recognize that as I implement this infrastructure, in 12, 18 months time, the growth rate could be such that I'll be doing 150,000 credit card applications a day. And in order to meet that growth, I need to have an IT infrastructure that's flexible, that develops with the business requirements, that develops with the transaction and volume requirements as this evolves over a period of time. And these organizations are embracing the principles of SOA because they recognize that flexibility, that agility, that cost effectiveness are the fundamentals of what's required to meet this growth in a cost-effective way without constraining themselves through perhaps a more tightly integrated, as the traditional model would require, solution for for their market requirements. So we're seeing an awful lot of I guess, education and engagement in these developing marketplaces around the principles of SOA.